policy is to get concessions. Domestic advisor John Ehrlichman.
Well, his position was that he'd been elected as the individual under the constitutional system responsible for the conduct of foreign policy and the waging of war, if you please. And that foreign policy just couldn't be made in the streets.
Ray Conniff and his very famous choral group will now entertain us. And if the music is square, it's because I like it square.
But protest closes in, even at the White House.
President Nixon, stop bombing human beings, animals, and vegetation. You go to church on Sundays and pray to Jesus Christ. If Jesus Christ were here tonight, you would not dare drop another bomb. Bless the Berrigans and bless Daniel Ellsberg.
Nixon orders Foreign Policy Advisor Henry Kissinger to begin secret peace talks with the North Vietnamese. America makes a major concession. Communist troops can stay in the South, but Hanoi still insists on the removal of President Thieu. Nixon retaliates.
Okay, radios?
When the North refuses to back down, Nixon orders heavy bombing by giant B-52s. 1972 brings massive escalation. North Vietnam invades across the border. Only round-the-clock bombing turns back the ground offensive.
Setting B090 in 1 minute.
I understand, 090.
Roger, Paul. This 3 is coming out pretty good. Roger.
Hanoi is now the new front as Nixon orders the B-52s closer and closer to the capital. The city is ringed with Soviet anti-aircraft guns and surface-to-air missiles.
Turning 090. Lead has been killed there.
Roger.
The bombing reaches the industrial suburbs. Hanoi reports heavy civilian casualties.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Stand by to release. Ready now. Bombs away.
Nixon sustains the bombing, ignoring world criticism. Nixon is anxious to force a peace agreement before the November presidential election.
Let's get post-bomb release.
In October, Hanoi settles. Its troops will remain in the south, and President Thieu will remain in power. Nixon sees the terms as honorable. A week before the election, Kissinger announces peace is at hand. Nixon is re-elected by the greatest number of popular votes in American history. There is one major snag. Kissinger has failed to convince Thieu to go along. On a hurried visit to Saigon, he tells Thieu to accept or face a cutoff in aid. Thieu says he cannot accept the North's troops in the South.
I am not a yes man, I am not a puppet, I am not agree with everything the American would like to impose to our people.
Hanoi now stalls as well. Nixon responds with maximum force. The B-52 strikes central Hanoi for the first time. The bombing lasts for 11 days over Christmas, 1972. Hanoi is now willing to sign the peace treaty.
The ceasefire will take effect at 2400 Greenwich Mean Time, January 27, 1973. The United States and the Democratic Republic of Vietnam express the hope that this agreement will ensure stable peace in Vietnam and contribute to the preservation of lasting peace in Indochina and Southeast Asia.
Even as the agreement is signed, fighting continues. Thieu calls the agreement an American betrayal and predicts full-scale war. North Vietnam's peace negotiators are welcomed home as victors. Hanoi has repeated the strategy of prolonged war which tired the French 19 years earlier. America's last soldiers leave. Under the treaty, a mere 50 U.S. military advisors remain from a one-time force of over 500,000. Nixon and Thieu meet one last time. Nixon secretly pledges full U.S. retaliation if South Vietnam's existence is threatened. But Nixon himself is swept from office by the Watergate scandal. The U.S. Congress begins to cut back aid to Saigon. South Vietnam is alone. In December 1974, the communist leadership decides on a 2-year program for military victory. They assume that American bombers will not return, that the American people are tired of Vietnam. Defense Minister Giap.
Even now, if they deploy their Air Force and Navy, they will fail again. The Vietnamese people do not fear such things. It is obvious that our people, particularly our countrymen and soldiers fighting in the South, have beaten the American imperialists.
Vietnam, the 10,000-day war, will continue in a
In 1975, the Communist Armada rolls into place. 100,000 troops and heavy weaponry move along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The central region collapses in the first few days of attack. Within weeks, Hanoi's forces overrun an army that took 20 years and billions of dollars to build. Under intense pressure, Thieu resigns. He hurries into exile, bearing a lasting bitterness toward the United States.
They have abandoned. They have sold out us. They have a stab on their back, on our back. It's true. It's clear. They have a betrayed.
As communist forces advance to certain victory, President Ford declares the war is over.
Today, America can regain the sense of pride that existed before Vietnam. But it cannot be achieved by refighting a war that is finished as far as America is concerned.
America's message that its Vietnam involvement is finally ended brings panic in Saigon. The early objective of safeguarding democracy in South Vietnam is reduced to the hurried evacuation of a favored few. As the Vietnam conflict ends, the majority of Americans express only relief that it is finally over. For the North Vietnamese, it has taken 30 years. Diplomat Ha Van Lao.
There were a lot of emotions at that moment. Everyone could breathe again. The war was over. Peace was established. And above all, we became the true masters of our own country, our own land, independent. Our first thoughts were of our president, Ho Chi Minh, who was not there to see with his own eyes the most glorious moment in our history.
Saigon's presidential palace, noon, April 30th, 1975. The end comes after 10,000 days.